Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Roger Cabanis from the Office of the Chief of Public Affairs. We have on our panel today the Secretary of the Army, the Honorable Christine Wormuth, the Chief of Staff of the Army, General Randy George, and Sergeant Major of the Army, Michael Weimer. We will begin today's event with our panel having an opportunity to provide opening remarks, and then we will open it up for questions. Please wait for me to call on you. We have microphones in the back that will be moving around the room. Please wait for those before asking for our live stream and transcription. We are limited on time, so questions will be limited to one and a brief follow-up. I'd ask that you please direct your question toward one of our panelists, not all three. When asking your question, please lead off with your name and organization. I will now turn it over to the panel for any opening remarks. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. Really appreciate it. We had a little bit of excitement in the opening ceremonies. That was a little unexpected, but like I said, spotlights our great democracy. I'm really pleased to be here with the Chief and the SMA. I'm very lucky to serve alongside them. I think we've got a great leadership team, so glad we're all here together. I also want to thank all of you in the press for reporting on us. You know, as I've often said to some of you individually, you know, you shine a spotlight on us, and that keeps us accountable. But I think, you know, you also help us get our story out there. And I'm struck that, you know, one of the things you all are reporting on quite a bit right now is all of the work that the total Army is doing alongside FEMA and others to help with hurricane recovery. We have over 1,800 active duty soldiers right now who are working all across the Southeast, and more than 7,000 Army National Guard soldiers, all doing great work. So that's just one example, I think, of the kinds of things that your reporting helps bring to the attention of the American public. I do want to break a teeny bit of news here this morning, which is to announce a new benefit that the Army is going to be providing to our soldiers. It's called Operational Deployment Pay. What this is going to do is for soldiers who are deployed for more than 60 days, they will receive $240 a month during the time of that deployment. And that is both to recognize the hardship of being away from families, but also the rigors of deployment. And that is something that will be officially implementing retroactively to October 1st of this year. And then I also want to thank Congress, of course, for working with us to provide the appropriations to fund that operational deployment pay. So with that, why don't I turn it over to General George.
Thanks, Secretary. I'd also like to thank you all for being here today. I assume it's a day off. So we appreciate you. I don't think that there's a better place to be than right here spending it with the Army, but I know I'm biased. And I'm also, like the Secretary and the SMA, really proud of what our troopers are doing. And I'm looking around in here. Some of you have been out there and seen what all of our troops are doing, whether it's down supporting the hurricane relief, out in the eastern flank in Europe, right now in the Middle East. We were just out in the Pacific, but really everywhere I go around the world, seeing what they're doing. So I was kind of the new guy here last year, and we'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but excited about what our troops are doing out there. Very focused on their warfighting mission, and we talk a lot about being really focused on building lethality and becoming more cohesive as teams, and then also learning from the modern battlefield. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about here over the next couple of days, what we need to do to make sure that we are transforming and continuing to adapt to the battlefield. And I know we got several panels and things that are on that, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail. But again, we're happy that you're here with us and look forward to your questions. And I'll turn it over to my battle buddy.
No, it's good to be here with you. It's I was new last year also, so thanks for reminding me of that too, Chief. Now, we've got a busy 3 days, but it's been a busy year, and the demands on the Army, to the Chief and the Secretary's points, are just increasing. And so you're gonna hear a sense of urgency, and I think you heard that from the Secretary's speech already. And I know you're going to hear that theme throughout the next 3 days. So look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you, distinguished panelists. We'll start with questions. Lita.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. This is for either the Secretary or General George, whoever wants to tackle this. The U.S. announced yesterday that it's sending a THAAD battery to Israel. Can you say, where is that going to be coming from? And more broadly, can you talk about the strain on the Army's sort of air defense soldiers and systems, and where you think this is going, how the Army can address this?
Sure, I'll start, Lita. The THAAD deployment's going to have about 100 soldiers who will go over to Israel. That's not a very large number of soldiers, so it's not adding, a tremendous amount of additional strain broadly to the community. But as you know, the air defense artillery community is the most stressed. They have the highest op tempo, really, of any part of the Army. And I think, what we're trying to do to manage that is really two things. One is modernizing our integrated air and missile defenses to try to create more capacity. And that's why I mentioned in my speech this morning the fact that we're moving to have the LTAMS radar work with the IBCS system. That's going to greatly increase the capacity of the existing Patriot force that we have, and that will, help do some to relieve some stress on our soldiers. And the other thing we're doing is we're just constantly trying to be as disciplined as we can and give the Secretary Austin, the information he needs to accurately assess the strain on the force when he's considering future operational deployments. We have to be as choosy as we can be about what we take on. But of course, in a world this volatile, sometimes we have to do what we have to do. I don't know, Chief, if you want to add.
Yeah, just to agree completely with the Secretary. I mean, this is our most deployed formation, I think, and everybody wants U.S. Army Air Defense Forces. We've seen them every time we've gone out. I think we've gone and seen them around the world. I've been very, very impressed. Everywhere I go, they're super motivated. And I was laughing a little bit. I saw them in the Middle East, and the only thing that they asked me for was a beaver fit gym to work out while they're over there. So they're staying very motivated. What we owe them, and we've done, Secretary talked about what we've done with recruiting. We're well over 100%. That's one MOS that we're monitoring very specifically to grow that capability and look at continuing to grow that capability in the next couple of years. And then I think what we need to do is with LTAMS and IBCS, what we're doing is working to see how we can pull all that left. So we have prototypes that are out there. There's a lot of software work that's involved with that. So I think those are the kinds of things that we need to do besides growing the capacity, is seeing what we can do to transform them as well to help alleviate some of that burden.
And where is it coming from?
I don't think we're going to comment on the operational details this morning.
Mike.
Thank you. Mike Stone from Reuters. Boeing announced significant layoffs. How has the company helped the Army understand how its helicopters and munitions programs will be impacted? And how is the Army working to support the troubled defense contractor?
We've been pleased with the support that we've gotten from Boeing on things like our Chinook fleet, for example. And to my knowledge, we're not expecting the layoffs that the company has announced to create difficulties for our programs. I think, Doug Bush, our Assistant Secretary for Acquisition, is in very good contact with his industry partners. And to my knowledge, we haven't heard any concerns being raised.
Haley?
Thank you. Thank you all for doing this. I wanted to follow up on the THAAD battery to Israel. I know you said you didn't want to comment, but just in case, can you give any kind of expectation of when those soldiers should arrive in Israel? And does this raise concerns for you all about drawing U.S. soldiers into the conflict more directly, given that they may be at greater risk of, injury, harm, being on the ground there in the mission that they'll be doing?
I'm not going to comment, Haley, on the when they're going to arrive. Again, for security, for force protection purposes, I don't think we want to go into detail on that. And I think, you know, to your broader question, I would just say this isn't the first time that we've deployed a THAAD to Israel. We sent a THAAD over there in the immediate wake of the Hamas invasion into Israel a year ago. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we'd also had a THAAD go over for exercise purposes in 2018 or 2019. So, you know, I think we should view this THAAD deployment as for what it is, which is another visible statement of our commitment to the security of Israel as it deals with, you know, everything that's coming at it from Hamas and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Right here in the front, Sam.
Yes, thanks. Sam Scove, Defense One. This question actually is for the SMA. So when we talk about transforming in contact, a lot of that ultimately rests on the NCOs who are skilled in electronic warfare, drone operation, and the Army is moving more and more towards fielding more of those types of systems. I imagine we'll eventually see it expand past these light infantry. Do you have any concerns about attracting, retaining those types of very highly technically skilled soldiers? And really any of your thoughts on that would be of interest.
I mean, concerns, first off, it's good to see you. Concerns, I mean, I think we have to have some concerns. I mean, it's a very competitive market out there. We see it with recruiting and we see it with retention. But we've got a lot of capability to keep those soldiers in. First is the purpose. They want to do their jobs. We see that. We're seeing that with transforming contact brigades right now. We're seeing soldiers who are getting to do things they hadn't had an opportunity to do before. We talked about it, and now they're doing it. Matter of fact, we're hearing from all the other brigades, hey, when are we going to get to do that? So now we're trying to figure out how we can do this faster with that sense of urgency I referenced. But as far as retention is concerned, absolutely. I watch it daily. As a matter of fact, that's every 2 weeks in detail, a specific list of MOSs, and a lot of them are our high technical MOSs, because we know it's not going to get any simpler. We're getting more advanced. So our professional military education piece, we'll hear quite a bit about that from me tomorrow at the Leading Change brief, putting a lot of emphasis in that, because leading that technical capability is tough too. So absolutely watching it.
And just a quick separate follow-up, but the Army is putting more and more into sort of health, especially when it comes to tracking that with technical means. Could you speak about any of those efforts and sort of where you see that going? I mean, will everyone get an Oura Ring at some point?
Oh, wearables. Okay. I was wondering where you were going with that. So we're working it. Best squad competition just wrapped up yesterday with the 10-miler, and for 18 days straight, we put wearables on them, a couple different ones. But it nests completely with our holistic health and fitness. It's H2F. Because again, that's part of transforming also. People are our platform. That is our number one platform. I love all of our things, don't get me wrong, to our industry partners, but our people are definitely the priority. And so I think you're going to see a bunch of that. Interesting to listen to youngsters on the best squad talk about, I can't believe how many calories I burnt. Did you see your sleep score? What's your sleep score? That is a good thing. That's cultural change for better fitness all around.
As I say, I don't need a ring to tell me how crappy my sleep is.
I do want to add that what we have seen in the TIC brigade, Sam, is that retention has actually gone up. I mean, I think they know that they want, they know that technology's out there, they're part of the change, and I think what you've seen that firsthand, that they're helping us adapt our Army, and it's our NCOs out there that really understand how all this stuff fits together at the very tactical level that are helping us lead some of that change.
Right here up front, then we'll move around.
Hi, Meredith Roden with Janes. I wanted to ask another follow-up on the THAAD battery. Given the assessment has been there's a need to send that, how does that impact the assessment on Israel potentially buying back the Iron Dome capability? And can you say anything more about where that is in the lease process?
Meredith, I don't have anything to add about that. I don't think, again, I don't think this deployment significantly changes Israel's calculus, for example, about how they're thinking about buying back Iron Dome.
Jason up front.
Jason Sherman from Inside Defense. Secretary, what's the current cost per soldier that the Army calculates now? And can you say a bit about how rising personnel costs are impacting the overall budget? What does that mean for the affordability of the Army of 2030? And are you going to have to look at some kind of a night court process again going somewhere in the future?
Jason, I don't have a cost per soldier off the top of my head, but what I can say is that 53% of the Army's budget, which is about $185, $86 billion a year, goes to taking care of our soldiers, families, and Department of Army civilians. So that's, pay and benefits, health care, MWR programs. So it's, more than half of the United States Army's budget. It's a very significant, piece of our budget. And so we do have to, I think, be constantly monitoring that balance and trying to be good stewards of our resources. As I said in my speech, fundamentally the United States Army is about its people. We're much more about, we're defined by our soldiers rather than being defined by our platforms. So that investment makes sense, I think, in terms of taking care of our soldiers and families. But we can't let that get to be too much larger of a share of our budget, or it will crowd out, a very important, I would say, focus for the Army right now too, which is our modernization effort. And we also obviously have to fund our readiness. So the Chief and I and the SMA are constantly looking at the different programs and, again, trying to make decisions that are data-driven so that we don't inadvertently allow the resources we're spending on soldiers and families to crowd out the modernization that we have to continue with. At this time, we're not contemplating another night court. I would argue that in the last, this is my 4th year as secretary. It's my 4th budget cycle. We are, of course, gearing up for POM. We are going to present, obviously, the budget to Congress in the spring, and we're starting to look at POM 27. But every single year we've been doing that. We've been scrutinizing where do we need to continue, what programs do we need to end, like Shadow and Raven. We're doing a lot to fix our networks, to consolidate our IT programs, and we're doing a lot of that in the service of trying to create fiscal efficiency.
And given those rising personnel costs, do you think the Army of 2030 is, we see on so many ideas on display here at the show, is the Army on a track to be able to afford what it's looking for?
I think if our budgets remain flat as they have in the last few years, we're going to continue to have to make really hard choices.
Can I jump in on that? Because that's an important aspect. I mean, and it's something that we spend a lot of time talking about. I wasn't here for night court, but, we do have to, just like you do in your personal life, I think everybody's got to make tough decisions about what they stop doing and what they stop spending and what they stop spending money on. We have the best troopers out there in the world and worth every penny, but we are looking, there's programs, we add things, it seems, and what's really hard is what you decide to stop. And so we have, there's a requirements process, it's called the AROC. We've kind of flipped that around and now we're calling it CORA, and that's deciding what things that we're going to stop doing and re-looking at requirements. And I can give you a lot of examples where previously we were buying equipment, vehicles, radios, extra stuff that now can be done on an app, and that's a lot cheaper. And so I think it's a combination of all those things that we're going to have to take a look at as we move forward. So what we're trying to do is make sure, because when I remind my parents, back in a very, very small town in Iowa, and tell them what our budget is, they're like, holy cow, that's a lot of money. And so we got to spend every dollar, get value out of every bit of it. And I know our soldiers are the highest on that value chart.
Todd.
Thank you. Todd South, Army Times. Thank you. was curious if you could just share some more information about the operational deployment pay that you mentioned, Secretary, or whoever else might be geared to talk about that. Is it specifically 240 regardless of rank by month? How was this decision made? Kind of what went into this?
It is a flat 240 per month. You know, we did have discussion of this, and I think our view is that all soldiers of all ranks are, you know, sharing the rigors of deployment the same, and they're all, you know, away from their families while they're on deployment. So a flat rate made sense to us. It is going to be oriented around operational deployments. So things like, for example, you know, taking a brigade to Fort Irwin or to JRTC in Fort Johnson. You're not going to get ODP for that. It is going to be, you know, things like the brigades and battalions, for example, who've gone over to Europe as part of the Reassure mission, things like that. That's what I've got to add.
Is this just a time-based, you said is a project? Is it just for the next 6 months or a year? Is it indefinite until you or the next secretary decides to change that? Or what's the kind of status of it?
I think, you know, I don't know a lot of new benefits that end. So I think our view is, you know, this will be something that we will offer to our soldiers for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
Part of the other decision, Todd, is like if you get jump pay and everybody's doing, jump pay is the same for everybody. And so and I know that it'd come out and there was different talk about it, but you know, everybody is doing exactly the same thing. And that's how we all sat down and talked about this.
Yep.
Matt?
Hi, Matt Bainart, Defense Daily. For General George, on transformation and contact, what are some specific technology successes that you've seen since that effort has kicked off, and what are some of the kind of institutional challenges you're still working through, and how do you expect that initiative to grow over the next year?
Okay, I'm going to the last part, we're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow. And again, I do think we need to grow. Every formation that we have is going to need uncrewed systems inside it. They're going to have to evolve EW, all of those things. So we're going to talk about how we're going to do that. And again, it's going to be not doing some other things that I think they're going to help us figure some of that stuff out. What's been really good is if you go out to a formation, and I'll invite you, we got our next rotation that is happening in January, and that's going to happen in Europe. And we're doing it, we've done one that is just finishing up in the Pacific. We did the one down at Fort Johnson because we're learning different things in different environments. I mean, UAS work different in different areas. Also, things are moving very very quickly. We've even had some updates with some of those systems. So what I think we have learned something across every one of those areas. What I didn't list out was the network. I think what has been the biggest thing for us, and I talked about this a year ago because I've lived in all those formations for my whole career, was getting after fixing the network. And so I think what we have seen is these big C2 nodes that have shrunk down to very, very small. And some of you were in here. As an example, when we were at Joint Readiness Training Center, they could not find the brigade TOC. So it was the observer controllers, and they were looking for it, and they couldn't find it. So they were in a pretty crappy location out in the middle. And then they had remoted all of their C2 nodes, so they had no signature whatsoever. That's the modern battlefield. So, I mean, I think we're constantly learning and evolving, and I've been really, really happy with all these units are sharing their lessons so that 225 actually picked up, we got them sharing, they picked up where 2101 left off, and we're really proud of that fact.
And then just as a quick follow-up, but anything you'd maybe want to preview ahead of what you're going to say tomorrow, and then how should we see the outcomes of transformation and contact so far reflected in the upcoming budget requests?
Well, I think we've already been talking about this. I think we had this conversation about what we needed to do across these areas. We've been having this for quite some time. So we have, in this upcoming budget request, we are going to be focused on that. And you've heard the Secretary talk about it this morning. You'll hear me talk about it more tomorrow. And we've been very clear with this on the Hill as well, as what we need to do. I mean, the world, all this stuff changes in 3 weeks or 3 months. is how do we become a little bit more agile while maintaining the proper oversight to make sure that we can, change with it. You talk to a lot of these companies out there, the tech companies, and I have a panel, I think, with, a couple of them in the next few days, and they will tell you that 6 months from now, things are going to be completely different. So we want to buy modular open system architecture systems that we can put any different kind of sensor on. I think that's going to help with the money problem as well, and that we can continue to adapt. So we should be, after this last formation, we'll probably be talking in the spring about what our overall lessons learned are and exactly what the formations are going to look like. Tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we're going to expand, what our initial concept. So our transforming in contact 2.0.
Far left, and then we'll go over to Dan Shear.
Thanks. Sean Carberry, National Defense. Both the Secretary and Chief spent a lot of time this year messaging Congress about the importance of passing the 25 budget on time, the harm of continuing resolutions. Can you provide any examples now that, once again, there's a continuing resolution, how it's affected any specific transformation, modernization initiatives? Are there new starts? Are there spool-ups? Are there things that are tangibly affected right now by this continuing resolution?
Yeah, it varies sort of whether we see a 3-month continuing resolution, for example, or whether that winds up going longer. But I think, when we've looked across our various programs, there's more than about $8 billion worth of projects and programs that are being slowed down by the continuing resolution. We have 23 different new starts, for example, that we aren't going to be able to make while we're under a continuing resolution. There are various things we'd like to do in the recruiting space. For example, we don't have the flexibility to do some of that in terms of marketing that we would like to purchase because of the continuing resolution. It also affects things like military construction, for example, and other, sort of renovation and modernization projects. So there are a lot of different impacts. Sadly, the Army and the other services are pretty used to operating under a continuing resolution, but particularly if we go 6 months or longer, it will really be an impediment.
And again, can you provide any specifics of some of the new starts?
We can get that for you, I would say, after the conference.
I'll give you a quick example just from last year was we wanted to make some adjustments to Coyote missiles and then increase, the production of them, and we weren't able to do that. And that's a, counter UAS type thing. So again, it's hard to adapt. I think all of you have a good appreciation for how rapidly things are changing, and it just takes away our flexibility to be able to adapt to that, to the environment.
Dan.
Hi, Dan Shear from Inside Defense. Either the Secretary or the Chief can answer this. You all have talked about flexible funding for FY26 in the areas of UAS, counter-UAS, EW. I'm wondering if you have had any conversations with members on the Hill about that, if they've given any feedback, and just sort of based on either positive or negative feedback, how that's going to shape your strategy for flexible funding going forward, and if there are other procurement programs that you would want to take a similar approach if this goes positively in the next year.
Sure, Dan. Both the Chief and I have talked to a number of different members, particularly appropriators, but also authorizers. And I think, there's considerable support. I will say I was sort of cautious about how much progress we would make in this area when the Chief and others started talking about it. In my experience, appropriators in particular are leery of what they see as slush funds. But I think given the dangerous environment we're in and the recognition by everyone that technology is evolving as rapidly as it is, there's more openness to this. So, we've been talking to both members, but also clerks and PSMs on the Appropriations Committee about how we could perhaps consolidate budget line items into fewer pools and have the ability as a result to be able to move money around. And I think, I don't want to get ahead of those conversations because, like I said in my speech this morning, we are trying to work on this together with Congress. But I think there's openness to it. I think part of why there's openness to it is because we are targeting it to UAS, counter-UAS, and electronic warfare. We're not trying to eat the whole elephant all at once. We're trying to kind of start with more of a pilot approach, see if that works, and if it, if members and their staffs feel like they can have the oversight and transparency that they need to have to do their jobs, we may in the future be able to expand it.
And quick follow-up, General George, you mentioned with the LTAMDS integration into IBCS, I think you said you were trying to move it to the left. How quickly would you anticipate accelerating it, like in the next year or so? And does the testing schedule really allow for that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've heard us talk about, there's been a lot of things that we send forward that are, they're prototypes, but they're also much better in capability. And so what we don't want to do is wait a year, send it out, to some test range, and then get everybody, on board with it, and then wait another year to get it with soldiers. So what we're trying to do is compress all of that. You've seen us do when we've sent either high-powered microwave or directed energy or whatever else that's overseas. So it's very similar to that concept, that's what we're looking at in a couple of locations. And what ends up happening is when you get it out there to our, soldiers, NCOs, junior leaders, and they actually get a chance to use it, you get feedback immediately on what it is. And, just looking at the prototypes, they're much more capable as it is. So I think that we can also increase our capability while we're at it. So that's what we're trying to do. That's kind of its own transforming in contact.
Tony?
Hi, Tony Capaccio with Bloomberg. One of the key systems for transformational contact is IVAS 1.2. Madam Secretary, I know you're not deeply involved in the acquisition, but you've been following it broadly. How did the soldier touch point in August go? And what's your overall feeling for the way the progress the program is making? And General George, the THAAD program, I'm not going to ask you about shortages, but in layman's language, can you talk a little bit about the capabilities it brings to that theater? Doesn't that TPY-2 radar kind of give you an IBCS capability, although nascent, to connect the Navy and Israeli air defenses?
Mm-hmm.
So Tony, on IVAS, I would say, zooming out, we want to give our soldiers the very best night vision capability possible. And we want to move, to the SMA's comment about wearables, we want to move to wearable technologies. We've gotten a lot of feedback from soldiers on IVAS. We actually asked the Ranger Regiment to work with it this summer, and we're still sort of working through that feedback. So we haven't made final decisions about IVAS. We have opened up the program, so I think you are probably aware Microsoft has brought in Anduril to work with them on it. And I think we're going to be, looking at that and working through, again, sort of some of the most recent feedback before we decide how we're going to go forward.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so I think for all of our air defense systems, anywhere we're going to go in the world, we are going to be operating as a joint team. So that's, to your point, that's exactly where we need to go with all of our system. And a big reason why we're really focused on the network, and a big reason why we're focused on IBCS and all of these aspects. So I do know that THAAD will be a great increase in capability when it's sent over there, and to help tie that whole picture together.
Can I ask one quickly? You've had a number of exercises with Israel, like Juniper, Cobra, and on a couple other ones in the past. Have those come to play now in terms of this integration? In case there are need of those exercises?
Yeah, I don't know specific to this. I can tell you this is why we exercise with our partners everywhere that we do this around the world. I mean, it makes a difference to actually, you get personal interoperability, getting to know each other and how you operate. Same thing with systems, and it's why we do that. We're doing that around the world, really, and it makes a big difference. And I'm going to be fighting besides joint with our partners and allies.
Ashley.
Hi, Ashley Roki with Breaking Defense. To follow up on that, are there additional 100 soldiers going with this unit? Will there be additional soldiers going to man other systems, or is this sort of the starting point to open that conversation?
We're not announcing any other additional deployments at this time, Ashley.
Okay. And then also sort of on supplemental spending, as you have a higher op tempo of whether it's in Europe or in the Middle East, is there sort of a date that you're going to need more supplemental spending to continue operations, or are you sort of curtailing exercises and things already at this point to stretch the dollars?
We're not curtailing exercises right now as a result of the CR. There's certainly talk of a supplemental, there's been talk of a supplemental, obviously, to deal with the hurricane recovery. And I think, looking ahead, there's certainly Ukraine is going to continue to need assistance to fight Russia. So I think, there have been broad discussions about supplementals, but right now we're not having to curtail activities.
Hi, Ellen Milheiser, Synopsis. General George, you mentioned a culture of change in increasing fitness among the soldiers. Researchers say that the number of obese soldiers has doubled from 10,000 to 20,000 since the end of the pandemic. What are you doing to address that, and are you taking any lessons learned from the soldier prep course where you've dealt with obesity among new recruits?
Yeah, great question. So, yeah, we have noticed that. I mean, that's why we're having some of the challenges, I think, with in putting people in future soldier prep course. The anecdotal feedback I get down there from a lot of them is it's been really good that I turned in my phone. We give it to them for an hour a day. I'm sleeping better. I'm eating better. All the stuff that we wouldn't find surprising, the real basic stuff. And I think what's good about that future soldier prep course is if you're less active, what we're also trying to reduce is injuries, because you can't just go from 0 to 40 or 50 with that, but it's a combination of things. We've also made the decision to invest a lot more in health and holistic fitness, the H2F program. So we have the nutritionist, the physical therapist, occupational therapists, strength coaches that are down there. Make sure that we're focused on having fitness centers that they can use and build. And I think that's making a difference. We've seen that in every one of our formations where we've had H2F. It is increasing performance. It's increasing how people perceive themselves. It's been, I think, good all the way around, and so we've pumped that extra. I don't remember we did an additional. Our only challenge right now is hiring everybody as fast as we can. We're trying to hire all of those folks to come on, but it's obviously something that we're going to have to be focused on, I think, for the near future at least.
Yes, sir. You doubled down on it. Both of you did. We're 111. We're at 66 in that brigades right now, trying to get to 111 in FY26, because it's that important, to your point. And now it's how do we extrapolate that to our guard and reserve teammates who have a challenging environment, but they need it also. So we're trying to figure all that out, because to the money question, it takes money. Those 22 experts that the chief was referencing that come with the H2F, it's not about the kettlebells, it's not about the racks and the sandbags. It's those SMEs, those subject matter experts that come with H2F, are what our soldiers, I think, are really, especially the non-commissioned officers, they're really falling in love with, because we're teaching them how to fish, not just giving them a fish.
The last thing I would just add is we are trying to change our food strategy for our soldiers, to the nutrition part. I was just at Fort Jackson recently to see Future Soldier Prep Course, and I saw one of our dining facilities that's been kind of changed to offer much healthier, both healthier food, but also sort of more on-the-go options, different hours, and we're really trying to spread that out across the Army. So we've got we're seeking some exceptions to policy right now in terms of how, believe it or not, we have these recipe cards that govern what we can make, and we can only buy food from certain vendors, and we're seeking exceptions from that to allow us to offer more appealing, more nutritious food in our DFACs. Because frankly, I think, we're already paying for soldiers to eat, who live in the barracks at least. And if we made the food more appealing and healthy, that would be good in terms of their physical health, but it also would mean hopefully they would stop spending their out-of-pocket money on Uber Eats or Popeyes or other things that aren't particularly healthy.
Are you taking any steps to make it possible for soldiers to prepare their own food in the barracks for that currently?
We do have some of those options. I mean, we have meals that are kind of ready-made that soldiers can bring. And I've seen, I've been impressed with like the air fryers I've seen. I mean, and a surprising number of soldiers who live in barracks are actually wanting to make some of their own food where they can.
Meal prep is pretty popular in different places. I think that's what they were talking about.
That was also part of the new barrack standard, Madam Secretary, recently approved too, was, as we invest every dollar into barracks, having those kitchen areas for them to be able to actually, buy food, store the food, and prepare the food.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and we will go to Patty.
Thank you for taking my question. Kind of going back to the air defense, the increasing demand on air defense soldiers, is there anything that the Army's doing to kind of help decrease some of the pressure with the high op tempo? And what is dwell time between deployments looking like for those folks?
They are definitely, outside of the desired limits for dwell time. I don't have the exact sort of dwell ratio right off the top of my head, Patty, but they are busy, which is, part of the challenge that we have. And like I said earlier, I think what we're trying to do is to make it as clear as possible. When a combatant commander comes in and says, I need another Patriot here in CENTCOM, the Ukrainians want another Patriot, for example, we try to lay out for Secretary Austin and Deputy Secretary Hicks what exactly does that mean, both in terms of the strain that it puts on our soldiers and their families, but also what it means in terms of readiness and our impacts on modernization. I mean, one of the biggest concerns we have, and I think one of the biggest points of tension we have, is that when we're able to replace the legacy Patriot radar with LTAMs and connect it to IBCS, we actually, gain 360-degree awareness, which increases the capacity of our Patriot batteries. But if we can't get them into depot and get them into the modernization window to reset, we can't do that. We need to be able to bring these units home to be able to go through that modernization process. So we're trying to lay that out for Secretary Austin so that he can weigh those risks, essentially current versus future risks, as he makes recommendations to the president about whether to send a Patriot here or there.
And is there anything you're doing kind of on the recruiting side to get more soldiers interested in air defense positions?
Yeah, we
Go
are.
ahead.
I'm just, I don't remember every specific, we're tracking we have a list that the SMA and the secretary and I, when they come in, and we take a lot of recruiting briefs, which you wouldn't be surprised by, where we have like the top 16 MOSs and they move, and we are doing fairly well in 14 series, which is what that is for air defense. And really trying to press hard. So, I mean, there's the other thing that we're looking at, too, is, SMA talks about this all the time, about retention, and what are we doing also to retain them, even given that high op tempo. So what do we have, what kind of levers do we have? Because they're very good, but obviously deploying for a year and coming back for a year and deploying for a year is tough to do for anybody, but especially for some of these young, troops that are starting families. So I think we're looking at every possible lever, and some of that is growing, some of it is that also with the technology that will change, actually you get an increase in capability and actually requires less people too. So we will be able to grow capability, which is why we're trying to pull all that left and do things a little bit different.
Thank you very much, distinguished panel. We are out of time. I would ask if everybody could just stay in place for just a moment while our panel departs. Thank you very much.